Welcome to Food, Wine, and Whiskey, a podcast about having fun conversations on tasty dishes, vinos, and spirits from around the world. Rob is your host. He is an avid home chef, WSET Level 2 award in wine, and a whiskey drinker and collector. Time to set the table. Here's Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Foods of Italy, where John Fodera from Tuscan Vines, johnfodera.com, and I are having a conversation on the foods of Italy. So let's jump right back into the part 2 of this conversation. We'll finish this up. Hope you enjoy it. If you haven't heard part 1, you might want to go back to the library and check that part out first, and then come back and enjoy part 2. But let's jump right into it. Here we go. Me and John back at it. So here's a food that I absolutely enjoy and probably would eat it more if I could. A lot of these things, but it's gnocchi. I think there's some people who know gnocchi around the States, but I think there's a lot of people who have no idea what this is. And tell me, John, to me, traditional gnocchi is made out of potato. Mm-hmm. Is that right or is that wrong? I see some people make it out of pasta.
It depends on where you're from.
Okay.
So when I was down in the South in Campania, we were in Amalfi, and this is a family trip, not a tour thing. And my son wanted to go. He's like, let's do a cooking school. That would be crazy. I'm like, you really want to do that? And he's like, yeah. He's like, it would be fun. I'm like, okay. So, my youngest son and my wife didn't want to go, so the two of us just went. And that's what we made. We made gnocchi alla Sorrentina was one of the things that we made, and that was just with potato. And we ground the potatoes, probably 10 pounds of potatoes. There were a lot of us there, maybe a dozen of us doing it. But it was just, it was potato, salt and pepper. I think we put just a tiny little bit of white flour in there.
Yep.
And then, I can't remember if we used olive oil or if we use egg. There must have been something in there to bind it, but you mix it and gently form it into a dough, and then you just roll it into like a snake, and then you cut them into gnocchi sized pieces, and then they taught us how to flick them with our thumb.
Okay.
Over this little tool, but it was just flick, 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 and we made a bunch, and then we ate what we made. Up north, no potato.
Okay.
So they'll use, again, the more expensive semolina flour. The South is poor. It's easy to grow potatoes, right?
Yep.
They don't, other than the Irish potato famine, no diseases come from potatoes. They're cheap. You can grow tons of them. But in the North, they use the semolina. And it's just, the semolina flour, a little bit of white flour, again, water, and they go like that. And so those are a little bit trickier to do because, as we were taught in Amalfi, when you put the potato through a ricer, that's what makes the gnocchi light and airy.
Yep.
So it's almost hard to get those lead sinkers when you're doing it that way. When you have the semolina, it's a little harder technique to not make them so heavy.
I can see that.
But I like them both. I like them both ways.
Yeah, I like them both. I didn't know if one was more traditional than the other or not, but you've answered that question. They both are, depending on region. And again, that's why I like having this conversation. I get to learn as we go as well. And to your point with the potato, I make them with the potato. That's the only way I've made them. I don't know that I've ever made them with pasta, but I do use that potato ricer, and it's game changer as far as Definitely is.
Well, yeah, they have to be cooked. Yeah.
Well, yeah. After you boil them, you rice them. Yeah. And for those who don't know, a ricer, if you think about a garlic press, but it's for potatoes. Yeah. It's kind of that.
Just
kind
bigger.
Of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have one of those, you could grate them by hand on a.
Oh, that's a good idea. Cheese grater or something, box grater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could, box grater. You could do that. It would just take longer, but.
Yeah. But it would be worth the effort in the outcome of that dish to do that. So for sure. Then just
if you're going to go through the trouble of, peeling the potatoes, boiling the potatoes, and then you're going to do it the right way. Why not do that? Because then it just won't come out good. Yeah. They'll be heavy and they'll be dense. They won't be good.
One of my favorite dishes to make is a gorgonzola gnocchi with a fillet. So with my meat on the side, and my side dish my starch would be that gorgonzola gnocchi, because
meat and potatoes.
Yeah, and you get that blue cheese or gorgonzola that goes well with steak a lot of times, and to me, it's just a pairing that I really enjoy.
Yeah,
you have a favorite gnocchi dish?
Another northern recipe, again, very expensive, is the gnocchi with the gorgonzola and walnuts.
Oh, walnuts!
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. Do you toast the walnuts or no?
Yeah. So you or you could roast them.
Okay.
So, but you use a little bit of cream to get that gorgonzola melted down into a sauce, and then you just hit it with some black pepper and the walnuts, a little bit of parsley, and now that is a rich dish. That dish might be the only dish that I would consider, having with an Amarone wine.
That's a good point. Yeah. Any other foods, dishes from up north? I mean, I know cured meats, they're big in that area. Are they only in that area when we start talking about, pancetta and sorpressata and all of the different cured meats? Are they all over?
They're all over.
They're all over. Okay.
Cured meats are from all the way north to Sicily. I mean, they have different names, different techniques for making them. I mean, when we go to wineries in Tuscany on the tour, they'll bring us, if we're having lunch there, the antipasto is usually some bread, some oil, some cheeses, and about 4 or 5 different cured meats.
Okay.
Especially at this one place where we go, the guy was, traditionally a butcher, and he still is. He has a bottega in town, and he serves us probably 4 or 5 of the cured meats that he makes, and they're all pork, but they're all different.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they don't even look the same.
When you think about it, the pig is king, isn't he? When it comes to eating meats, I mean, the things that you can get from
it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, a lot of the Southern Italian, Tuscany, Umbria, definitely down south, even the pasta, the words that they use are ragu, which just means not like the pasta sauce ragu that we know, but the ragu is just a long cooked meat sauce, typically.
Yeah.
And those are almost always based in pork.
Yeah.
In Tuscany, you'll find ones that are all beef. But they both do, beef and pork, especially around Siena, a lot of pork there.
Yeah. Well, let's, unless there's something else you want to talk about in that northern region, let's come down to that central area and get into the Tuscany region.
Sure.
And I'm going to let you fire away there. I mean, there's one ingredient that you've exposed me to. And by the way, John, I've been invited to a dinner tonight, my wife and I, and the couple who invited us over made the request for the dish that has become popular down here for me and my friends. So
the shrimp with beans?
Yes. And I think it's tied into this area, right?
Yeah. Well, the shrimp, when I had it the first time, and when I kind of stole the idea for it, it was in the Tuscan Maremma, which is sort of the wild, untamed coastal region of Tuscany. So there was Sassicaia, which was known back in the early to mid 1960s. All the way south of that, there was basically nothing. There were literally, wild horses, cowboys, and water buffaloes and things like that. And it has slowly become a great place for vineyards. And with that has come, more tourists, more wineries, more food, etc. So I was down there. It's within, a kilometer or 2 kilometers of the sea. So there's a lot of seafood there, especially around, Livorno, Grosseto. And this was just in a little tiny trattoria, and it said, gambari with beans, and I like beans, so I got it, and I'm like, wow, this is just, an unbelievably delicious dish, and it could not have been more simple.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it when I came home. I mean, and I tweaked the recipe, once in a while, like, I usually use onion. Sometimes I use some pancetta in there if I have it.
Oh, that's... Yeah,
I've made it both ways. The pancetta gives it like another little interesting layer of flavor, but it's just basically You render down your onion, you throw in your shrimp, maybe a little bit of butter or olive oil. When the shrimp turn color, you throw in the beans, you cook them through, you warm them up, you season it, you hit it with parsley. I mean, and it's a perfect, like you said tonight, it's like the perfect antipasto. If you have some crusty bread, and again, you can have a little bit of like hot water. It doesn't need to be like seasoned pasta water. If you need to loosen it up a little bit, because you want it to have like a sauce consistency.
Yep.
So you can dip your bread into it or whatever it may be. But it shouldn't be soupy. But yeah, I mean, whenever we have, holidays, or if I'm hosting a wine dinner, I always make that, and I just make it in a shallow pan, and then I drop the pan right in the middle of the kitchen island and let people have at it, and it just goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very popular. I'll tell you, I'm just a quick story. Recently, Sandra and I went back home to where I'm from in central Missouri, small little farming communities. And some friends of mine recently, about a year ago, came back from a trip to Italy. And they're not wine people or anything like that, but they know I'm into wine and food, and Italy's, one of the areas I really love. And they asked me, hey, can we do a little, Italian wine dinner, and would you cook some stuff, and we'll open some bottles of wine and stuff? And I said, yes. So when I put the menu together, that was on the menu, as one of the appetizers was the shrimp and beans. And when I told them that I was going to make this, they were like, yeah, are you sure? I mean, beans and shrimp, it just doesn't sound right. And there was a little pushback, and it was funny. We came to dinner night, and I made this dish and served them all outside, and they were like blown away. Everybody wanted the recipe, and of course, I pointed them to your website. But yeah, they were like, I would have never thought that could work, but holy cow, is that delicious. So, I say that to say, that you find in other cuisines and, places that they're not just putting ingredients together just to throw it in there. I mean, sometimes they are, but sometimes it works. Some of the greatest things are accidents, right? To your point, beans could have been that filler, and they went, well, crap, it works. It's really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So in Tuscany, that's one of my favorites, but the point there is beans. Beans is a big part of is this fair to say, John, a big part of the food scene in central Italy?
Oh, huge. I mean, if the people in Boston are bean eaters, they've got nothing on the central, Italians with the Umbrians, the Tuscans, Le Marche. There's beans everywhere in Tuscany, one of the other things that I make, which I can't even really, I've never put it on my website, but it's just white beans. So if you're using canned beans, I usually make 2 cans. And with 2 cans, I would use probably 8 cloves of garlic.
Oh, wow.
So it's just olive oil in the pan, get your garlic cooking, dump in the beans. After you've rinsed them, put the beans in, salt and pepper, stir them through. And then you want these to almost be like, you don't want it to be like disgusting with the oil, but it's beans and oil is basically what it is.
That's all it is.
And it is. And the beans will absorb the oil. You just stir them around. I've made them for a bunch of people on Twitter and local family. And it is a typical dish in Tuscany that they'll serve with a Fiorentina steak. Most people, they order the steak, then they order the beans. And you can make them, with the dried beans. That works well, too, if you have the foresight to soak your beans overnight. But that couldn't be any more simple.
Yeah.
They throw them in. I mean, they're in every soup. You can make them with pasta.
Okay, that's what I was going to mention. They are in some pastas, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, chickpeas, one of the pasta cecchi. Cecchi is a chickpea. Pasta cecchi is mostly Southern Italian, but I love to make that dish. And again, what I do with that one is, and we'll get back to Tuscany. I'm not moving, but you toast up panko breadcrumbs. You toast them up in a frying pan with a little bit of oil, and then you set them aside when they start to turn color. You make your pasta with the cecchi. This is on my website, and you use the breadcrumbs as a topping on the pasta when you're ready to serve. It takes the place, again, of the cheese. Why? Because they can't afford cheese, but they do have stale bread. right? So that's where it comes from. Again, it's that cucina povera.
And it adds a little texture to the dish.
Oh, it's ethereal texture.
Yeah.
It really is phenomenal.
Wow, that's awesome.
That dish is great. That you just I mash a little bit of the chickpeas up a little bit. Some of them I leave whole, but I use the pasta water and I use a tiny little bit of chicken stock. It gives it that extra depth of flavor.
Yeah.
And then it's just really just pasta with chickpeas and breadcrumbs.
Well,
But in going back to Tuscany, I mean, again, that again, even that has its roots in peasantry, beans. A lot of the we're talking about the Medici and they had their servants and their people. So after they would cook the meals and feed the Medici, the servants would eat whatever was left, right? So one of the classic things that they used to do, especially in the winter, is they would make a soup, and the soup is called ribollita, which literally means reboiled. So what they did was, if they were making serving ham, and so maybe they had a little piece of a ham bone, and maybe they had some leftover kale, and they had a handful of beans, everything went into the soup pot. And first it was fed to the aristocracy, and then when the peasants ate, they reboiled everything, and that's what they ate. But you see ribollita all over Tuscany, and it's so delicious.
Well, you had mentioned a couple times now, and I'm not familiar with this steak, this famous steak of Tuscany. What is this, John?
The Fiorentina?
Yeah, I don't know this.
It comes from, there's a cow there, a breed of cow called Chianina, and it's specially, it is legally, how do I say? It's legally protected, right? So just like Parmigiano Reggiano has its area, these cows are specially raised in an area where they're eating special grass, so they can't wander out, then they're no longer able to be called a Chianina cow. So that is the prized cow that they use to make their Fiorentina steak. And basically all that it is a porterhouse, with a New York strip on one side and the filet on the other, with the big bone, but they cut it, I'll say 3.5, 4 inches thick.
Oh, nice.
So, and in Tuscany, of course, they grill it out over wood. Lots of times they cook it over grapevine cuttings. And what they do is they'll usually cook it, I would say, now bear in mind, one steak would probably be about 4 pounds. So it's big. It's usually enough for 2 or 3, even 3 people if you're having also pasta. So maybe 3 minutes on each side, and then they take it and stand it up on the bone vertically and cook it again for another 3 minutes. Now, most people here in the United States would be turned off by the rareness of it. It is rare. They cook it, I think they call it sangue, which means, it's kind of off the word Sangiovese, which means blood of Jove. So they cook it to the blood, basically. So it's almost, it's not cool inside, but it's very, very reddish purple. So like my wife wouldn't be able to handle it. She would need it a little bit more. And you can ask them, alla media, a little medium. But even medium to them is what we would consider a good rare. They just can't bring themselves to do it.
That's what I was going to say. It'd be hard to probably cook it much past that, knowing that you're not going to get what the dish is supposed to be.
Yeah, but it is great beef flavor. It truly is. It's a special steak.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned how it's cooked, because anybody listening who might be going to Italy and in the Tuscany area thinking they might want to order that, now they at least know what to expect as far as the cook for that particular cut of meat. So that's something good to know also, before you order it. Yeah.
And a little tip on that one is the price on the menu will be by the gram.
By the gram?
So if you see, correct. So if you see, Fiorentina porterhouse steak, €6. You're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
It's so cheap. And then when you do the math, it's like, okay, this is, $150 piece of meat.
Yeah.
So you need to remember that it will be six or whatever per gram. Same thing in Venice will price their lobsters that way. I had to help out a group of German tourist young girls. They were there. I guess they must have been there for a vacation or something. And they were like, oh, look at how cheap the lobster is. It's $1 a gram and blah, blah, blah. And I said to them, I said, do you speak English? They're like, yeah. I said, do you see the lobster that guy's eating right there? And they're like, yeah. I said, that's probably a $150 lobster. It's 200 grams or whatever he's eating, 500 grams he has that lobster. And they're like, oh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, word to the wise.
That's good, because I can see, we just always look at ounces or pounds. And, a lot of times the eyes can trick you and you just read it and your mind tells you you're reading something else. But, yeah, being aware that it is in grams, that's a huge tip, John.
Yeah. And give or take, 500 grams is about a pound. It's a little bit more than a pound.
Okay.
So that comes in handy if you go to a grocery store and you're trying to order, cold meats. If you want mortadella or sopressata, prosciutto sliced, you can.
Or you want seafood.
How much? Pound, yeah, half a pound. You'll say 250 grams or 300 grams.
That's a great tip to have as well. Yeah, I forget the measuring system is going to be different over there, and so when you go to if you're staying for a while and you've got a VRBO or something, you want to do some cooking, that's a good point, or ordering off a menu. Yeah, that's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
Staying in Tuscany, any other foods of Tuscany that folks should know about when they go to visit this region? Are there things that they automatically know about, because they're just known in that area? And are there some things under the radar that you go, look, here's a food, and it might be something that you don't get in a touristy type of place in Florence or Siena or somewhere. Maybe you've got to get out to a smaller village and you go, if you can get to a place like this, you're going to find this food.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first one I'll say, maybe you could find it in cities. You probably could. But for me, when I'm in Tuscany, I'm looking for, three things. Number one, rabbit. Because the Italians eat rabbit all the time, and it's something you don't see very much of here. But it is succulent and it is delicious. So if you can get past the whole, Bugs Bunny, Easter Bunny thing, and that doesn't bother you.
So can I tell you
rabbit
something?
Over.
Go ahead.
No, what?
I was going to say, the folks I mentioned in Missouri that recently, just not quite a year ago, got back from their trip from Italy. I asked one of the guys, I said, what was your favorite food that you had in Italy? And he goes, believe it or not, it was a rabbit. I think he called it a ragu or a stew or something that he goes, it was absolutely, he goes, nobody else on the menu or nobody else at our table, there were 6 of them, wanted to order it. They thought he was crazy. What are you ordering rabbit for? And he said when he ordered it and took a bite and was just oohing and ahhing about it, and then everybody was like, okay, well, give me a bite. He said, hands down, I won for best dish ordered. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, I've had it a couple ways, but that's where you mostly see it is they'll cook it and pull the meat off the bone and add some tomato and cook it in, as a pasta condimento and that, grate over the wide pappardelle noodles.
Okay.
We were in Montalcino the first year on the Rustic Tuscany tour with my partner, and we were at this place in Montalcino having dinner, and I'm looking at the menu, and it says Coniglio arrosto morto, and Coniglio is rabbit. So I looked at my partner, I said, what is this? I said, it says rabbit roasted dead. And he's like, yeah. He goes, they roast the hell out of it. He goes, they roast it until it falls off the bone, roasted dead, until there's nothing left, right? But then they just strip it off the bone and put it with beans and sage on a plate, just almost like a rabbit chili, only not ground meat. It was fabulous. And you see tenderloins of rabbit stuffed. And again, that's kind of like an aristocratic thing. There might be a pine nuts in there and a little bits of egg. The stuffing is usually very fancy. Sometimes prune, or not so much raisins, but more prunes. Because in Tuscany they have plum trees.
So rabbit's number one that you look for. Number two?
Number two is absolutely the cinghiale, the wild boar.
Okay.
Because that is everywhere, and they are destructive SOBs, and they are just invasive. So if it's on the menu, I'm ordering it, whether it's ground meat in a pasta ragu, or shredded pasta ragu, or roasted, like a stew. Bring it on. I'm always looking for cinghiale, and like I know you have wild boar, in Texas. I've had them here. They're not the same. They're just not the same.
I'm sure they're not.
And then it's a special treat to have that there. And then the last thing I was thinking of, which is really special for me because I've tried to make it and I can't. There's a pasta dish in Tuscany called aglione. So aglio is garlic in Italian. Aglione is big garlic. So this is a type of garlic that grows in the autumn. So we see it when we're there in October or September. And the head of the garlic is about as big as my fist.
Oh, wow.
So the cloves are huge. So all this sauce is a tomato and olive oil and tomato sauce with this huge garlic cooked in it. And then when you get your pasta dish, there you don't even see, like there's no garlic on the dish, but that flavor is in the tomato. So the only thing I've ever found in this country that's similar to that is that if you've ever seen the elephant garlic.
No.
I
think I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it. Yeah.
It's not the same. And I tried to make it, my friend told me how to do it. I just can't replicate that flavor here. And
are you saying that large garlic that's cooked in that tomato, does it melt away into the sauce, or they take it out after a certain point and it's just infused its flavor?
I think probably both.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they probably slice some so thin that it disintegrates into the sauce, but then I think they probably pull it out. I mean, it just has how when you roast garlic in the oven and then you spread it on bread, it's sweet, right?
Yeah.
It kind of has that flavor in the sauce, but I mean, it's a bright orangey tomato sauce. It almost looks like they've added carrot to it, but they don't. So it doesn't cook long. It doesn't turn that dark red color. It's very bright, and I have not been able to replicate it at all. And when you walk through the streets of Tuscany, you'll see these things. You don't even have to be on a produce market. You could be in any bodega that sells wine, cured meats, olive oil, and on the outside of their doors, you go in the shop, they'll have these gigantic aglione hanging there. And they're huge. I mean, they're huge.
So is that one of the reasons it's tough for you to make it, is that you can't find that particular garlic? Is that the key ingredient?
I can't find a suitable alternative. I mean, I have to find out. I probably would not be allowed to bring that in.
Yeah.
To buy one and bring it back.
And to me, I'm thinking, for folks listening, the bigger the garlic, the less potent it's going to be. Because, when you think about grapes and things, if you have on the vine, if you have just yield matters. The more you have on there, the less concentrated flavors, because it's going to all these different grapes. And I always think about, a smaller onion is going to pack more punch than a great big onion. And I would think the same would be with that garlic. That must be why they're using it, that it's got this great flavor, but it's not this overpowering kind of punch you in the face where it's almost offensive. It's just, it has to work, and that's why they do it. So that just, if people are wondering, that big a piece of garlic, how in the world, why would you even want to try that? That's why. It's a particular garlic that works because it's kind of softened, if you will, because of its size.
Yeah, and it really, like if you made the same dish without the garlic, right? It wouldn't look the same and it wouldn't taste the same. And you would be there like, what's different here? What is going on? But if you didn't know, because it's not garlicky, it's just a slight hint of garlic, but it's a sweetness. It's very hard to explain. But when I see it on the menu, I gravitate to it all the time because I just can't do it here.
Yeah. That one I've never heard of. I'm very curious, and keep me in mind, John, because if you ever find a way to get those garlic over here, there's a friend of yours in Texas who might want a couple.
All right. Well, I'm going to
I'd
see
love
when
that.
I'm over there. When I'm over there this fall, I'll see. I don't remember if I asked or not.
About
But
bringing those back.
I think if the garlic has the roots on the bottom, I think you're allowed to bring it in.
Okay.
I can't remember.
If it has the roots on the
usually-
bottom, you can plant that bad boy.
Yeah, exactly? Who knows what would happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's close out this episode with another topic or another item. It's more in the beverage category. Coffee, very
That's what
very
I was just
popular
thinking.
in Italy, but they have a particular version. You know, when they say cafe, you're not getting a regular coffee. You know, when they say cafe
That's
latte, it's different than what our latte might be. So
Yep,
coffee's
and
big. And funny
listen-
story, John, I recently did a show with the Italian Chamber of Commerce here in Houston, and two people from Italy were over promoting a project they're doing for the Italian aperitivo. And we were talking about coffee. They'd offered me a coffee. And I just got into a conversation with them about, the coffee craze is huge right now in the world. And pour-overs and different brew types. And, again, everything's a rabbit hole now. Coffee's one of them. And I was asking him, I think of Italy as being very traditional. And, espresso is the coffee of the land. That's what you drink. I said, is pour-overs, is this kind of, call it an American type of coffee? Is it coming into the country?
I think it's a Starbucks thing.
Yeah, he said very, very small. People still like their espresso.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say if being a winemaker or a chef is a passion in Italy, then coffee is a religion. They are. It is dogmatic. It is serious. I mean, for me, there's three basic ways to order coffee. You either have an espresso, and it's espresso, not espresso.
Right.
So this isn't the
S,
this
not
is
an
the
X.
HOV lane on the highway that goes faster than the other lanes.
Yeah.
It's espresso. So you have espresso, you have cappuccino, you have Americano, aptly named, I guess. And if you really want to get fancy, you have an espresso ristretto.
Okay.
So your Americano is just like an American coffee, but they'll make it with espresso, but they'll just add a ton of water, and you'll get.
So, do they always add the water? I've seen some places that will give you the hot water on the side so that you can get it to the point where you.
Oh well, yeah. Either way, though.
Either way, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, and the thing is, like when you go into a bar, and the word for coffee is cafe.
And by the way, you just said something. I want to interrupt you, John, but we call them a coffee shop. Just so people listening to what you just said, they call it a bar.
Yeah,
when you go
it's
to a
bar.
coffee shop, it's a bar.
And the reason for that is because bar in Italian culture, it's usually what you think of. If I say, hey, let's go to a bar, it's exactly what you think of, right? So, but it's a coffee shop during the daytime, from morning till daytime, and then it turns over into a bar, a liquor bar at night. So that's usually both. You might want a grappa shot in your coffee in the morning, or you may still want an espresso in the afternoon or in the evening. But yeah, that you're right to that point. That's right. So if you go in and you order a cafe, and it's not a cafe like a restaurant, it's CAFFE, means coffee. Depending on where you are and depending on how you look, if they think you're American, I've had them say it to me. I'll walk in and say, cafe, per favore. And they look at me and they'll say, cafe espresso or Americano. And then I'll just say, they recognize them. They can tell that I'm not an Italian. And I'll say, espresso, cafe. So they might ask you if you want an American or a true espresso. Otherwise, you just order a cappuccino, and if you want a ristretto, they just means to restrict. So they restrict the amount of water that goes through the espresso shot. So instead of maybe an ounce of espresso, you'll get maybe 0.8 ounces. So it'll just be a little, even that much stronger. The other thing is macchiato. right? So macchiato, everybody thinks, oh, Starbucks, macchiato, caramel, this, vanilla, that. It's like, no. No, it's not a milkshake, right? It's macchia in Italian means stain. So it's an espresso stained with foam from a cappuccino. So it's an espresso shot with just a tiny little drop of foam on the top of it. Those are the hard and fast, coffee types. Those are not really where the dogmatic, religious rules come from. The religious rules come from when to drink either, right? So nobody in Italy, other than the tourists, would have a cappuccino after, say, 11 a.m. in the morning. Cappuccinos are made with whole milk, if not even a little light cream. They're rich, they're filling. When people in the evenings or in the afternoons, you want to pick me up. You're busy, you're running around, you go into a bar, you plunk down your money, you get the shot, whoosh, down it goes. And that's the one thing about coffee in Italy too, is that the shot that you get at a bar is served at the perfect temperature. So you can whoop right down without burning yourself, without it being too cold, and then you're right on your way. It's not a sit there and sip it for 5 or 10 minutes. If you're going to be that long with a friend of yours, then you'll have another coffee and you'll stay there longer. But in the evening after dinner, never a cappuccino. And like my issue with the Roman waiter and the carbonara with rigatoni, you run the risk of offending the wait staff or the chef, because it's, like I said, it's two reasons, right? It's a very filling and a fat kind of a drink. So you don't want that. The Italians believe you don't want to have that and then go to bed because you'll get sick.
Yeah.
But really is you're telling the chef, hey, you didn't do your job right. I'm not full. I'm still hungry. I need something to fill me up. So I want a fat cappuccino. So no, it's espresso at night. When we were there last year in Rome, the last day of the tour, we had met these two American friends of my partner happened to be there. And then they had just landed that day. And so he invited them to our farewell lunch. And the woman wanted a cappuccino, after lunch. It was like 3:30 in the afternoon. And my partner was cringing. He's like, you really want to have that?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. She's like, are you really going to try to make me order this from, a Roman waiter? She's like, I really want it. And she's like, I'll try my best, and sure enough, he's like, they grimaced. She's like, but they'll bring it, and it was just, it was almost unheard of.
I figured he could start with, okay, before I order this, she's American.
I'm sure he probably prefaced it with something. I was out of earshot, but I could see, the grimacing.
Yeah.
It's just not what they do.
Yeah.
Well, first thing in the morning, a cappuccino, a brioche, a croissant, fills you up, gets you out the door. But the other thing, that the Italians do at home, typically, they're not using a Keurig. Many of them don't have, an espresso maker at home because having a coffee mid-morning, mid-afternoon with a colleague or a friend is part of the ritual of their social network, but of their business network, right? So they expect to go out for espresso. Yeah. So if they do stuff at home, oftentimes it's with a mocha pot. You've seen those, right?
Oh, yeah.
So almost every Italian will have a mocha pot at home if they want something, a good, strong cup of coffee in the morning.
I mean, if you can use it and do it right, that makes a great cup of coffee. It's a pressure cooker.
Yeah, you can make a good, put a little milk in there as well. You don't even need foam. It just makes a good Americano, strong cup of, that's a Neapolitan thing all the way. I mean,
and I'll tell you, John, I want to get better. And when I say better, you can see here, I have an espresso machine right here, an Italian one. Mm-hmm. And I know you have one at home. My issue is, pulling that shot of espresso, being consistent with it to get the good flavor, to get the good crema. And I can get my beans, dialed into my grind size and make a great one. And then the next one's just off. And I'm like, how can that be? So consistency is my toughest thing. So when it's off a little bit and it's like, okay, it's a little bitter, well, let me frost some milk and dump it in, and now I'm good, because it takes away
Right.
some of that bitterness.
Are you tamping it?
Yes.
Do you have to tamp it? Yeah. I mean, that's a variable, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, if you got your grind right, and I know what you mean by that, I do the same thing. Yeah, because if it's not, the water, espresso means expressed,
Yeah.
right? So you're forcing the water, you're pushing the water through with steam power.
Yep.
Through the grinds.
9 pounds of pressure.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So it's if it's a little bit sour, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it can be sour or it can be bitter, depending on over extracted or under extracted. So
right. If it's under extracted, it has that little bit of sour flavor. That to me is worse than if it's bitter. I can always do something to it.
Correct.
Just put a little sugar in it or whatever, or make a cafe. Now maybe here we're going back again. People may not know what a cafe corretto is.
Yes.
So in the evenings, a lot of people after dinner, they'll want espresso, but they have a cafe corretto instead, which is a corrected coffee. So the coffee is corrected with a little bit of grappa or sambuca or something mixed in with it.
There you go.
So you kind of get your upper and your downer at the same time, and then you're able to go to bed.
Yeah.
For me, I have at night, and I have either no coffee or I have a decaffeinato.
Yeah.
The decaf espresso in Italy is so much better than here. Here, I just don't even in Manhattan, where you would think you could get the decaf is just not good. I don't know what the problem is. But I can't have it late at night. I'll just be wired. I'll be wide awake.
Yeah.
But in Italy, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. So that you have great coffee in Italy, but you have a very limited offering of what they're going to present to you for coffees in Italy, because it all plays off the espresso. The Americano, everything plays off the espresso. But I would also say, no matter what kind of coffee drinker you are, just like we're talking about with the food and with wine, go explore. What you think you may not like, you may kind of walk away going, I kind of want to drink coffee that way from now on. That's really good, and it is made right. You look at this very small extracted, ounce and a half, 2 ounces of coffee that packs a punch, but it also packs some flavor, some really good flavor.
It's a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
The crema can be creamy and well, that's what crema means, but it can be creamy and nutty and toasty.
Yep.
And as I say, it's just straight down and I'm on my way. But you know what? I mean, every time I'm there in Rome or I don't know about if I've seen in Siena, but definitely in Florence, I see a Starbucks or, maybe another Starbucks. I don't know if Italians are going in there. I should really go in just to see what's going on. If it's any different, I'm curious. Much like when I was in Paris one time, I went into McDonald's because I wanted to have French fries and champagne.
Oh, there you go.
Can't get that here.
Yeah.
But it was, the menu was different, but you can get a Big Mac and a beer. I mean, it's not so bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was just curious to see what was going on like that. And I'm kind of curious about Starbucks because I can't ever imagine an Italian going in there.
Do they have them there? You see them there?
Oh, yeah. I've seen them in Rome. I've seen them in Florence.
Only in the touristy spots.
Definitely in the touristy spots.
Okay.
Like I would imagine, if they let them in, like in Venice, I don't know if they would let them in there, but it would be, where the hotels are or by St. Mark's. I mean, that's the one thing, when you're talking to people, they ask me where to go, tell them where not to go. I never really felt taken advantage of in Italy. But we were in St. Mark's once and we were thirsty and we wanted to sit down and get a cocktail or a spritz or something. And, we were right by St. Mark's and I'm like, well, come on, there's bars all over the place. Well, I know it's going to be expensive here, but, we'll just get a drink.
Yeah.
So we sat down and the bars were all outside. They ring the big, gigantic piazza. They're all outside. And there's a couple places where, the place is so wide. There's bands playing music. So one's on one side, one's on the other, and they don't even, distract each other with their music. So we sit down and look at this guy's playing music. There's, I don't know, 10 or 12 people in this little orchestra playing music. So the waitress, she hands us the drink menu, and I'm looking at it, and my wife's like, "Oh, I don't know what I want." And I look, come on, we're leaving. And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "It's 15 euro per head for the privilege of listening to the music."
Oh, wow.
I said, we're $30 in and we haven't even had a drink yet. I said, "Come on, let's go walk a couple blocks off the square and we can get a spritz for €3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have to, I can see, if they don't have, command of reading, but I was like, come on, it's just little stuff like that.
You don't even know if the music's going to be good.
Well, it was plenty good, but I mean, come on, it's like, give me a break. I mean, come on, and you don't see that. See, that's the difference. When you're out of the cities in the countries, you don't see that.
Yeah.
The most you see is a pane e coperto, bread and cover. It's a bread and cover. So the bread that they plop on your table, you're paying separate for that, but it's maybe €3 for the table.
Yeah.
Not per person.
Right.
But that's part of how the culture of tipping doesn't really exist in Italy either.
Right.
So there's that cover charge. Sometimes they put on a service charge, maybe 10%, 5%. So you're not expected to tip, and that's part of that. But I've never seen anything like that, outside of Venice, unfortunately. But
well, John, this has been a fun conversation as always, man. Always enjoy having you on. Yeah. And just like I said earlier, teaser for love to do an episode on Italian desserts. And another one that's come to mind, kind of Italian sandwiches and street foods. I mean, bread, when we think about focaccia and we think about, how do you say the other one? Scalaccia? How do you say it?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's schiacciata.
Yeah, that's what it is. Sandwiches are made, and I think, would it be fair to say sandwiches are kind of a street food in Italy?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can go up to any pizzeria or bodega, and typically they have, if you're in an old, hill town or town, where there's pedestrian zone, right?
Yeah.
They'll have a window on the street, basically, so you can just walk right up to the window and
place an order.
You can do that with a piece of pizza by the slice, or in Venice, I did it. It was great. They had little cups of mixed fried seafood.
See, that's
just a window on the street.
That's going to be another episode that we're going to do, the street foods of Italy. So I think that would be a fun one, because when you're walking around, and you're not going to just go eat a meal. It's good to know what some options are for just kind of that food on the go, and that'll be another episode. We can do that.
And you know why? Because culturally, right, the best restaurants and the ones that you want to go to will not serve until 8:00 at night.
Oh,
so they probably won't even open till at least 7:30.
That's a great point. Yeah,
this is where you want it kind of, if it isn't gelato at like 3:34, 5:00, right? You want to just have a little something if you're used to going out at 7:00, because you're not going to be eating till like 8:30, 8:45.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So there's a little tease for everybody on a couple of future episodes: Italian desserts, Italian street food. But John, tell everybody, where they can find you at johnfodera.com. I just said it, but what's going on there as far as what are you covering now? What are some articles that are going to be coming out? What can they be looking for as far as content from you upcoming?
Yeah, I just released the first part of my Brunello 2019 coverage. So that's the most recent, vintage on the market, and, one of the most successful in a decade for Tuscany, for Montalcino. So a lot of people are after those wines and looking for a good place to buy them. So that was part one, included 10 reviews. I'm probably going to have at least 2, if not 3 more parts that I'll do. And then maybe the rest I'll just put out for the benefit of my newsletter subscribers only. I have a new recipe ready to go that I'm going to be putting up soon.
Nice.
And I have a couple new releases of wines that I'm going to touch on. I have a couple of dueling vintage wine, same wine, same different vintage.
Oh, nice. Those are always fun.
That I'm going to do 1 or 2 of those. So yeah, that's going to get me midway through the beginning of July. And then, I head over just with my wife in the middle of July. We'll be over there for about 10 days. And then I head back, for the tour in September, right after Labor Day, as a matter of fact. So it was a little earlier this year, but it's going to be a busy summer.
Yeah, I do want to say, to those listening, you kind of touched on it there, John. There is information on the rustic Tuscan tours on the website. And I will say that, if you have some interest, it's a great tour. It's way more in-depth, involved, not just with wine, but, what we're talking about today with the great foods that you're going to have over there pairing with these great wines. And you're going to have access to, winemakers and wines that you never would as just a tourist and booking your own, wine visiting trip over to Italy. Yep. But they fill up quick. I mean, John, I think, this year's obviously sold out. I think 2025 sold out.
2025 is sold out. I mean, we haven't taken any deposits yet, but so if anyone's interested, they should probably contact me to be on the waiting list. And the only reason I say that is because with 2023 and 2024, we had people that needed to drop out and we refilled, after the fact. So it does happen.
Get on the list.
Yeah. And 2026, I'm almost half full. So, I mean, and I haven't been promoting, I said the greatest compliment I can get is when we finish the 2025 tour. Everybody that went on the very first tour will have gone a second time.
Wow.
So
that tells you how good it is and what the experience is. And again, when you hear
it's
this,
different for them too. It's going to be different.
Yeah. You mix it up, different wineries, different. I mean, look, there's tons of wineries. And how many days is this trip?
It's like 10 and a half days.
Yeah. So, I mean, realistically, 3 wineries a day
on an olive oil mill, and we're doing a cooking class where we're going to cook our own lunch and then eat and have our own lunch.
Is it 2 to 3 wineries a day?
No, not 3.
2.
Some days it's 2, some days it's 1, depending on
the event that's happening,
level of our experience.
Yeah. And I'm bringing that up to give the example or to kind of get the point across that there's a ton of great wineries in Italy. And so if you to your point of going on the trip more than once, you're gonna visit and experience some different things every time you go. It gets kind of changed up a little bit.
Yeah, and you're going to be in places where, we go to a pizza place, in Maremma, where the pizza toppings, like you said, are simple and varied and crazy good. But we will be the only Americans in the place. Yeah. And this is just a place where the average person would never even go there. Right. They would even go to the town, let alone know where to go if they were in the town. Yeah. There's no reason for anybody to be there. But we know how to take them to places like that. That's what makes it unique. I say it all the time, we're not Mario Perillo here. This is not, we're not Rome, Florence, Venice. You want to do that, more power to you, but that's not what this is about.
Yeah. Hey, I always say my favorite places to eat are where the locals eat. I mean, if they're eating there, because they're not, that's where I want to eat. Yeah.
And one last tip for those going to Venice: don't eat on the canal. Don't eat by St. Mark's. Walk over the Rialto Bridge to where the residential area is and find a trattoria in there and eat. You won't even need a reservation. Well, John, that's the local area.
Yeah, that's all, I would even say in Rome, go find a back alley and a little restaurant down there somewhere, and you're probably going to get just an exquisite meal for probably a much better price.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
That's the thing, with all the inflation that we have here, again, culturally, that just hasn't existed in Italy in terms of, dining out. I mean, you go to Rome, like I was talking about before, the Jewish artichokes, you get 2 artichokes deep fried with salt and a little sauce. Maybe it's €6, and a plate of carbonara, maybe it's €12. Yeah. I mean, so it just, because that's their culture, food, family, and friends. It's not something to be, they're making the pasta for 80 cents. They don't need to charge $28 for it.
Well, and obviously we know in places like you up in New York and here in Houston, real estate matters. These people, these restaurants, sure. Part of their cost is that overhead. And that's another reason why I like to find these little, call them dives or whatever you want to call them, outside the city that, are in a place that's more affordable from a real estate standpoint, but are, so for my pocketbook, it's a way better experience for me, but it's still making some outstanding food. And that's, and I want to support those places. These are little restaurants that are doing a great job, that cook with passion and love, and don't have a huge marketing budget. So if I can go support them and get the word out, that's what we want to do.
Right. And the building has probably been in the family for 100 years.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no rent. There's no mortgage. They own the property.
Yep. So, John, as always, man, always enjoy these conversations. Looking forward to having you back on again in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.